Oh, hi. If you like the show, can you please leave a review wherever you listen to your podcast? Especially if you're listening on Apple, because it seems to really matter over there. Besides, you don't even have to write anything. Leaving 5 stars will do. If you don't like the show, however, well, that's your choice. But if you do like the show, it's a great way to help spread the word about the podcast and show your support. Believe me, I'm incredibly grateful. Alrighty, now on to the show. Hello, I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. It's Throwback Thursday, and in today's episode, I'm sharing the audio from 6 authors who shared their books at the inaugural Epigraph Literary Festival in April 2022. All these authors had books that will allow you to escape to a different time and allow you to immerse yourself in stories inspired by actual events. So if you love reading historical fiction, stay tuned. Have you downloaded your free copy of the Biblio Lifestyle 2023 Spring Reading Guide? It's a free downloadable PDF guide that shares some of the best new books of the season, along with a list of fun things to do, spring-themed recipes, and tips to help improve your reading life. So visit springreadingguide.com to download your free copy of the 2023 Spring Reading Guide. That's springreadingguide.com for your free copy of the 2023 Spring Reading Guide. Now, on to the episode. Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Reader's Couch podcast. It's Throwback Thursday, and in today's episode, I'm sharing the audio from 6 authors who shared their books at the inaugural Epigraph Literary Festival in April 2022. All these authors had books that will allow you to escape to a different time and allow you to immerse yourself in stories inspired by actual events. So if you love reading historical fiction, then this episode is just for you. But before we get started, I want to invite you to join us at our next virtual festival. I hope to see you on Thursday, April 27th through to Saturday, April 29th, 2023. The Epigraph Literary Festival is a free virtual event. It's all about books, the joys of reading, and the literary lifestyle. Plus, we're going to have an amazing author lineup, some great speakers, and fun sessions. So, visit epigraphlitfest.com for more details, but more importantly, to register for the event. Plus, you won't want to miss the fun happy hour sessions at the end of each day of the festival. I live for this session. It's so much fun. So register at epigraphlitfest.com so you can join us. Plus, early birds get first dibs on event swag. So again, go to epigraphlitfest.com to register, and I really, really hope to see you there. Okay, so now back to today's episode. And in this episode and every Throwback Thursday episode from today until our next event, which again starts on Thursday, April 27th, I will be sharing the audio from the author sessions here on the podcast from our very first event. Now today, I'm sharing the audio from the historical fiction authors who shared their books at the April 2022 festival. Today, you will be hearing from Amanda Skenandore, author of The Nurse's Secret, Dahlma Llanos-Figueroa, author of A Woman of Endurance, Eliza Knight, author of The Mayfair Bookshop, Louise Hare, author of Miss Aldridge Regrets, Madeline Martin, author of The Librarian's Spy, and Ruth Drouart, author of The Last Hours in Paris. So I really hope you enjoy the audio from the authors sharing their books at the festival. And don't worry, you can find a link with a list of all their books in the show notes. So, first, I'd like to introduce you to Amanda Skenandore. She's the author of the novel The Nurse's Secret.
Hello readers, my name is Amanda Skenandore. I'm calling in from Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm so excited to be here with you today and to share with you my upcoming book, The Nurse's Secret, which comes out this June. In addition to being a historical fiction author, I'm also a registered nurse, and it was my curiosity about the origins of this profession that inspired me to write about the first nursing school in America. You see, today, nursing is among the most trusted professions, but that wasn't always the case. Until the late 19th century, nurses were untrained and often illiterate. Some were recruited from workhouses and prisons. Hospitals were overfilled and squalid. Rats scampered between the beds. Only the poor dared to visit, while the wealthy, they got to enjoy on-call medical care at home. The Nurse's Secret takes you inside New York City's famous Bellevue Hospital in 1883, just as this is beginning to change. The invention of anesthesia, it allows for more humane operations. Minute organisms, invisible to the naked eye, have been discovered, and a new breed of nurses is at work on the wards. Based on the principles of Florence Nightingale's work, Bellevue is the first school of its kind in the whole country. It prizes discipline, intellect, and moral character. Only women of good breeding need apply. These women, they strive to heal the sick while also hoping to earn an honest wage. But Una Kelly, however, she has less wholesome motives when she comes to the Bellevue Training School. Having grown up in the city's slums, she's a rough and tumble grifter who can steal a pocketbook in 5 seconds flat. But when another con woman pins her for a murder she didn't commit, Una is forced to flee. She has to find someplace the coppers won't think to look for her, and the Bellevue Training School provides the perfect refuge. Pretending to be one of these demure, refined women the school prizes, she lies her way through the admission process and is accepted. But while her life on the street may have prepared her for the horrors of disease and injuries found on the wards, fitting in among her prim classmates and keeping up her ruse will prove her most difficult con yet. Among those she meets at the hospital are Drew, her overly chatty roommate, who's dreamed of being a nurse ever since childhood when she first read Miss Nightingale's work, but who can't stand the sight of blood and faints when she sees it. There's Edwin, a handsome intern, who's trying to repair his family's once esteemed legacy, and Dr. Pingree, a cantankerous surgeon, who believes, like many doctors of the day, that women are too fickle and too feeble-minded to have anything to do with the medical profession. The backdrop of the story, Gilded Age New York, is not the glittering city we so often see. This is the New York of cramped and crumbling tenements, of overflowing privies, of disease and poverty. But it's also a city of hope, a city of promise. And just as Una is getting a glimmer of that promise, just as she's beginning to realize that maybe there's more to life than grifting, a patient at the hospital is inexplicably found dead. Una's suspicions about this patient's death put her at risk of exposure, and she must choose between self-preservation or exposing herself, her true identity, in order to save others. As a nurse myself who never quite fit the traditional mold, I chose a fish-out-of-water heroine who's better at picking pockets than obeying doctor's orders. I hope you'll enjoy Una's story as she comes to learn as much about trust and friendship as she does human anatomy. In exploring early nursing, I stumbled upon something larger than a simple history. Transformation, whether of ourselves or a profession, it doesn't happen all at once. It can be slow, messy, and incomplete. Progress, not perfection, is the goal. Thank you so much for having me at the Epigraph Literary Festival. It's always a pleasure to chat with readers. I hope you'll enjoy reading The Nurse's Secret, which comes out June 28th, 2022. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce you to Dahlma Llanos-Figueroa. She's the author of the novel A Woman of Endurance.
Hello, my name is Dahlma Llanos-Figueroa, and I'm the author of A Woman of Endurance. I'm so glad to be here and tell you a little bit about myself and my work. I was born in Puerto Rico, came to New York when I was 2 years old, and then returned to the island to live with my grandmother when I was 10. That was a pivotal moment in my life. because that's when I fell in love with story and storytelling. The men were out with the cane and the cows all day, and the women took care of the house and the children. In the evenings, once their labors were done, the ladies from around the neighborhood came over, sat with my grandmother, and told stories on the porch. I was a child, so I wasn't allowed to be part of the conversation, but I had some wonderful learning experiences that led to my being a storyteller on my own right. The first thing I learned was to listen, and that is an invaluable lesson for any writer or storyteller. In addition to listening, I learned how to stitch words together to build a world, how to create tension, when to withhold and when to release information. And most of all, I learned stories that were never written in a book or taught in schools. So by the time I came back to New York City, I was hungry for more stories. I wanted to tell my story, but how? I didn't know. And so I went to college and was there. It was there that I was introduced to Piri Thomas, who is the first Puerto Rican novelist that I have ever read. And from him, I learned that our stories are just as important and just as interesting as anyone else's. And then I discovered Toni Morrison and Isabel Allende and Alice Walker, all of whom taught me that there are stories to be told, stories that have not been shared, that have been kept behind closed doors. They taught me what to say and how to say it. So I sat down and started writing my stories. I decided I was going to write my story my way. And so A Woman of Endurance is the story of an African woman who was purchased for the purpose of breeding. Her children were taken away from her at childbirth and sold, never to be seen again. Understandably, she became an embittered, enraged, and rebellious woman. After an escape attempt, she was beaten nearly to death and sent to another plantation. And that was the best thing that could have happened to her, because there she started a new life. Let me tell you a little bit about the world of Paula. She found a healer that healed her body, but who would heal her heart. She found a mother figure who protected her and supported her. She met Simon, a man who was always watching, which made her very uncomfortable because men had always been negative forces in her life. What did he want? Why was he there? And then there was Romero, the overseer. He was just waiting for her to make the first wrong step so she would end up in his hands, and he would teach her a lesson or two about the fact that she was a slave, and she would learn. And so all these people are in the covers of my book. And I hope that you will enjoy coming into my world and seeing what that was all about. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce you to Eliza Knight, the author of the novel The Mayfair Bookshop.
Hi, my name is Eliza Knight, and I'm calling in from Maryland. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to share with you my new book, The Mayfair Bookshop, a novel of Nancy Mitford and the Pursuit of Happiness. If you love historical fiction, family drama, books about books, bookshops, scandal, literature, debutantes behaving badly, mysteries and intrigue, and any sort of stories that make you feel all the feels, then The Mayfair Bookshop is the right book for you. The Mayfair Bookshop is a dual narrative. In one part, we have 1930s London and Nancy Mitford, who was one of London's socialites, one of the hottest socialites of the season, and an up-and-coming author. She was one of the bright young things, which were the young bohemian aristocrats running around and creating havoc and scandal, basically. And Nancy goes to all of the hottest parties, the clubs. She's friends with anyone who's anyone. She goes to all the fancy restaurants, dines on champagne and caviar. She's met the Queen, and she's friends with people who are nobly born, as well as literary icons, theater icons, and all sorts of famous fun people. You'd think that all of this fun stuff surrounding a girl would make her happy, but that's all just outside stuff, surface level. Deep down, everything feels a little bit broken. So when we start on Nancy's journey in the 1930s and go through World War II era, we're going all along with her for a lot of the struggles of her personal life. She had a fiance who ended up breaking her heart, and she quickly married someone else very shortly afterwards. And he ended up being quite unfaithful to her, as well as broke. She was often having to answer the door to the bailiffs who had come to collect debt from him. Two of her sisters were not only Nazi sympathizers, but close friends with Hitler. In fact, one of them was rumored to be the lover of Hitler, which was a little bit detrimental to Nancy. Her mother was cruel. She was not getting any of her own personal aspirations, such as the career as a writer that she wanted, a happily married woman, a mother. So she sort of feels like a failure in all the different aspects of her life. And she questions constantly, what is that next right thing to do? What's that thing she can do to get to all of the goals that she has for herself? And does she even have the energy to pursue it after so much heartbreak? During World War II, not only did she volunteer to drive as an ambulance driver, which did not go well, she was also working at the local first aid post, where she was given an indelible pencil and she had to write information, if they had any, on the deceased's foreheads that came in after bombings during the Blitz. She was also a fire watcher shortly after that, and had a brief stint with the BBC doing a show on fire watching, which she didn't last long at because people wrote in saying that they found her voice to be annoying. Additionally, she worked in a bookshop during this time. She started out as an assistant there, helping a friend whose husband owned the shop but had gone off to war as a soldier. And she quickly started running the place for her friends. She often had literary icons there. The store had a nickname called Club Nancy because she often had so many of her friends there. The bookstore still has a plaque outside of the shop right now that says the years that she worked there. And it also so happens to be owned by her nephew, a duke. With each passing moment in the novel, Nancy is unclear about what her purpose is going to be. And through a series of steps and missteps, she finally finds that one place and what brings her joy and happiness. Now, the second timeline is a modern American woman named Lucy St. Clair. She is a book curator, so she creates libraries for people. She's been looking for a lot of change. She is based in DC, which happens to be my hometown, and she's not really happy with her life. There's a lot of challenges at work with the people that work there, as well as sort of personal things. So when her boss gives her the chance to go to London to create a library for a special project, and doing so out of the Haywood Hill bookshop, which happens to also be the bookshop where Nancy worked during World War II, Lucy jumps at the chance. She's looking for something different, and this seems like it might be something right up her alley. Additionally, there was a mystery that her and her mother had been trying to solve throughout her childhood based on an inscription they found in one of Nancy's books, The Pursuit of Love. And so it's to a friend that they couldn't figure out who this friend was. It's sort of like a secret friendship. And so she thinks that perhaps when she goes to London to work in the bookshop and fulfill her own aspirations for her career, she might also be able to do a little bit of work on this side project and discover that secret. So for her, she's also working on finding happiness and the pursuit of her own joy and dreams. And at the end of her story, she'll have to decide whether she wants to return to her job in DC or make a move across the pond. And I've had a fascination with Nancy Mitford since high school when one of my teachers recommended we read The Pursuit of Love. It was a really fascinating book with some out-of-this-world characters, and particularly the child hunt I found to be very interesting. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. If not, I suggest you do. Additionally, I came across the Mitfords when I was in college studying for my family studies degree. We had a lecture on family dynamics and sibling relationships in particular, and the Mitfords came up because the sisters, who are the most famous of all seven, the brother is often forgotten. Their relationship is often talked about, and still to this day, there seems to be a fascination with the family, though it's been nearly 100 years since they ran through the streets of London and sort of took the whole world by storm. I went down that rabbit hole of studying them and became quite fascinated. And the idea of writing a book about them sort of started back then because I was interested in writing, but it was a very big project that I wasn't sure was something that I could take on. It was very daunting. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I finally decided to take that leap and go for it. And here we have the Mayfair Bookshop. So I'm very fascinated with friendships as well. which is why in the novel I created a fictional one for Nancy with her friend Iris. She had a lot of friends, real life friends. In fact, so many that I had to cut dozens out of the book just because it took up too much space and would have been really confusing for the reader. And Iris is actually based off of my own great-grandmother who had a love of books, and it seemed like the perfect place to honor her as a friend of Nancy Mitford. While the Mayfair Bookshop is a love letter to literature, an ode to our favorite bookshops, and a gritty exploration of family relationships and friendships, it also begs a very interesting question, one of which I have asked often of my friends and family. And that is, what are you doing each day, week, month, throughout the year that brings you joy? What is the dream or dreams you have yet to fulfill, and what are you doing to realize them? I think a lot of times we get bogged down in responsibilities, whether that's your family, your job, pets, chores, society obligations, and we forget that we have our own hopes and aspirations and dreams that don't just simply come to us. We have to actively seek them out. So what is that one thing for you, and what are you doing to get it? I hope you'll pick up a copy of the Mayfair Bookshop, which just released this month, at your favorite bookstore or library. And I hope you enjoy Nancy and Lucy's literary journeys. Thank you so much for listening.
Next, I'd like to introduce you to Louise Hare. She's the author of the novel Miss Aldridge Regrets.
Hi, my name is Louise Hare, and I'm currently sitting in South London in the UK. I'm really happy to be able to talk to you today about my new novel, Miss Aldridge Regrets. So what's it about? I have a main character, Lena, and she is a jazz singer. It's set in 1936 in London, and she has sort of grown up having all these big ambitions that she was going to be a West End actress and, you know, a world famous jazz singer. And that's really not happened for her. She's now singing in a sort of sticky floored basement jazz club in Soho. I'm really wondering, where's it all gone wrong? But then one day, this guy turns up at her front door and basically offers her the chance of a lifetime, which is to have a starring role in a Broadway musical. Now, it sounds too good to be true, and Lena isn't quite stupid enough to sort of jump at this at the first instance. But then later that night, she's working in the club and she sees a murder happen right in front of her. And she's not a witness, but she knows there's something funny going on, and that makes her think, well, maybe it's a good idea to leave town for a little bit, let this mess go away. So a few days later, she finds herself in first class on the Queen Mary sailing to New York with this guy who offered her the sort of dream opportunity. It all seems very glamorous, very lovely, except that a couple of days later, halfway into the voyage, she witnesses another murder, and this person is killed in exactly the same way as the man back in London. And she starts to realise there's more going on, she's more involved than she realised that she was, and maybe someone actually wants to kill her. So it's sort of a locked room murder mystery. I loved Agatha Christie novels sort of growing up. And just for the glamour, you know, everyone's dressed in sort of glamorous designer frocks and drinking martinis. And I really wanted to explore that aspect and that sort of fun side that I enjoy from reading like sort of a Poirot or a Miss Marple novel. The Queen Mary I chose partly because it was just really easy to get information. Because it was such a big deal when that ship was launched. It was sort of the biggest and best ship. It's actually really easy. There are great websites where you can go on and look at all the cabins, and you can look at all the different rooms and the original decor. And so I thought about making up my own ship at first, but then I was like, you know, this is the best ship. You know, at the time, this would have been the ship that everyone wanted to travel on. And one of the sort of groups of people that Lena runs into on the ship are the Abernathy family. And they are, you know, sort of the epitome of rich, glamorous, you know, the Queen Mary would be the ship that they would want to travel on. So that was how I chose my locations, as it were. But also it was really fun research. And then in terms of the other characters, as I said, there's the Abernathy family who Lena sort of finds herself sitting with at dinner. And it was really fun to sort of write those interactions because she's sort of come from nothing and she's sort of also sort of trying to pass herself off as rich and, you know, as sort of wealthy as they are. But also she has a secret, which is that she is passing as white and she's actually mixed race. So it was just kind of fun to sort of explore their attitudes and what happens when you're sitting somewhere and somebody says something about the community that you belong to. How do you react? Do you sort of out yourself or do you just sit there in silence? I was quite interested in sort of exploring that side of what it must feel like to keep that secret. And also part of the inspiration for the novel was when I started writing it was when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were in the press. And I remember a friend said to me, but it can't be racist because she kind of looks white. I sort of took a step back and was thinking, well, I don't think a lot of people especially white people, understand that actually race isn't just about the colour of your skin. It's sort of a little bit deeper than that. And so I wanted to sort of explore that very lightly in the midst of a murder mystery. But it sounds crazy, but hopefully it will just add an extra layer to the book. So yeah, I hope that has made you interested in reading the novel. It's out in July. It should be a good book club book, I think. But thank you for listening.
Next, I'd like to introduce you to Madeline Martin, the author of the novel The Librarian's Spy.
Hi everyone, my name is Madeline Martin and I'm calling today from sunny Florida. I'm here to discuss my upcoming release, The Librarian's Spy, which comes out on July 26th this summer. Here's where I confess to you that I would make a horrible spy. My hips and ankles crack like crazy. I can't tell a lie to save my life, and I am clumsy as all get out. So I can't imagine myself actually going into a spy-like situation and really doing very well. Well, unfortunately, during World War II, the IDC, which was the Interdepartmental Committee for the Acquisition of Foreign Publications, don't worry, I will always call them IDC, not that whole string of words, was actually sent over to neutral countries to gather intel for America. And unfortunately, they weren't given a lot of information on what they were supposed to do when they got there. And that was one of my inspirations for The Librarian's Spy. Ava Harper has a pretty type A personality. She's pretty pedantic. She's definitely a reader who loves to just pour through books. Somebody that I know a little something about. She's living her dream life in Washington, D.C. at the Library of Congress, where she works at the Rare Book Room. She absolutely loves her job. She knows everything about it. She's surrounded by books every single day, by readers every single day. It's absolutely wonderful. And her world gets absolutely flipped upside down when she is asked to serve her country and go to Lisbon, Portugal, where she can use her fluency in German and French to read through the publications that gather there. Now, with her brother in the war, she knows that she has to do her part to make anything happen to make this war end as absolutely soon as possible. So how could she possibly say no? She goes over to Lisbon, and as soon as she arrives in this country where she does not know the language, she's immediately met with a job that she has no idea what she's doing. So she's trying to go through the ropes of this incredibly no idea what she's doing situation, and it doesn't always work out the way that she completely expects, which you'll have to read on to find out. My French character, Elaine Rousseau, was inspired by an actual woman who existed, Lucien Wozniak, who worked for an underground press named Combat, and that was in Lyon, France as well. She was such an incredible woman reading about her life. I just couldn't help but be inspired by her. And so I really wanted to incorporate her bravery into the book and really infuse Elaine's character with so many of the incredible things that she accomplished. Elaine's story opens up with her husband disappearing, and she joins the French resistance as a courier in an effort to try to find out more information as well as do her part to really help the war end as quickly as possible. Of course, she will eventually go and start working in the underground press as well. Now, the thing about Nazi-occupied France is that it was a very difficult life for the French. There was very little food. There were people everywhere who were more than willing to spy for the Nazis. It was an incredibly dangerous time, and so I really thought that the coupling between Lisbon, where there was bountiful food and where it was completely neutral, and then in Lyon, France, which was, like I said before, the capital of the French resistance and Nazi-occupied area, you know, really the dichotomy between the two areas and what the women are living through, it really kind of came together in The Librarian's Spy. I was incredibly fortunate to get to do travel while I was writing this book. I'm an army brat, so I got to live 12 years in Germany, and I really was able to experience a lot of Europe while I was there. And for me, really getting to experience just different cultures and different settings, I feel like it really makes stories come alive so much more in my head. And so I was incredibly fortunate I got to go to DC at the Library of Congress and actually go to the beautiful location there. I was also able to go to Lisbon, Portugal for a week and do a lot of research there, and also to Lyon, France as well. And just getting to take in the sights, the smells, the sounds, and really incorporate all of those into my books. I feel like it really did help to give the story so much more of a 360-degree experience, at least in my head, and hopefully that does obviously transfer onto the page as well. In France, it was so fortunate. They have these things called triboules, which are covered passageways that link buildings together. So you can enter into one entrance and then you exit on a different building on a different street somewhere else, because they're all completely linked. And they used those a lot during World War II to escape Nazis, to have private meetings, to leave secret messages. So getting to go inside of those firsthand and really experience that, it was really truly incredible. And in Lisbon, getting to taste all of the incredible seafood, getting to walk on the beautiful basalt and limestone bedecked sidewalks that have all of these beautiful patterns. It really just was such an incredible experience. I am so very, very fortunate that I was able to take and be able to put into this book along with my heart. For those of you who love reader's guides, know that I will have a reader's guide coming up on my website very, very soon, especially for book clubs. I also do offer opportunities for me to zoom into book clubs, which is always so much fun. So please do pick up The Library and Spy, and I hope that you enjoy it. And thank you so much for watching this video, and I apologize in advance if I was a little bit foggy-headed. I've had a little bit of a cold lately. But I truly, truly appreciate all of you watching this video, and thank you so much for joining us today. Bye.
And next up, I'd love to introduce you to Ruth Drouot, the author of the novel The Last Hours in Paris.
Hello, my name is Ruth Drouot and I'm the author of While Paris Slept. And my second book, The Last Hours in Paris, comes out in July. The Last Hours in Paris is set in Paris during the occupation. This is the city I've lived in for the last 30 years. And as I walked around Paris when I first got here 30 years ago, I felt the atmosphere of the occupation in the plaques that are up on the walls and the fresh flowers laid by the plaques for members of the resistance that had been shot on certain spots, Jewish families that had been taken away. And it enthralled me and fascinated me to imagine how people lived through an occupation with the enemy for 4 long years. I started to imagine what it would have been like. And I really wanted to write about this time in history. I wanted to write about a German in Paris during the occupation. And I came up with a character called Sebastian, half French, half German, but brought up in Germany and forced to be part of the Hitler Youth. He arrives in Paris in 1944 after having been sent to the front in Russia, where he's been traumatised. So he arrives in Paris as a very traumatised and distraught, alienated young man. So Sebastian's story takes you through the streets of Paris in 1944, where any decent French citizen would never have spoken to the Germans. The only weapon they had left was their silence, and this was used frequently and bravely. So Sebastian really doesn't have a lot of contact with the French citizens, and against all odds, he comes to meet a very strong-willed young Frenchwoman called Eliza. And once their paths have crossed, everything changes. Both their worlds are turned upside down, and they're both called to be braver than they ever wanted to be. Then the time shifts to Brittany 1963, when Josephine, an 18-year-old woman, discovers that the man she'd thought to be her father was not her father at all. She had been brought up to believe her father was a French hero who died during the occupation. In fact, her real father was a German. I don't have a rigid writing routine, but I do work best in the mornings. I'm lucky enough to be able to write anywhere, and even if I've just got 5 minutes, I might take my laptop out and start writing. I can write, and I have written in airports, doctors' waiting rooms, on the train, between buses, and in fact, it's being between places that sometimes inspires me. I do like change, and so I'm not that keen on routine. I think The Last Hours in Paris is an interesting book to read because you learn about what it was like for people living during the occupation, but you also learn about the liberation and how it wasn't a liberation for everybody. With historical fiction, I enjoy creating an atmosphere that takes you back in time and just throwing in snippets and tiny little details here and there to create this atmosphere rather than giving a list of facts or great lengthy descriptions. I really concentrate in my writing on the emotion of the story. That's, to me, what I enjoy about reading, is finding the emotion, what moves you. And I enjoy writing books that move readers. I'd like to thank those readers who read While Paris Slept and who came back to me either at the events I've done or through email to tell me how moved they were by the story. That is really what I'm looking for when I write, is to find the connection with the reader. And I hope that The Last Hours in Paris will move readers as much as While Paris Slept did. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great summer of reading.
Alrighty readers, I hope you enjoyed listening to the audio from the authors who shared their books at the April 2022 Epigraph Literary Festival. If you've read any of these books, please send me an email or send me a message on social media so we can talk about it. And if you're planning to add some of these books to your reading list, I want to hear about it too. I also hope to see you at our next festival, so please register to attend at epigraphlitfest.com. That's epigraphlitfest.com, and join us from Thursday, April 27th through to Saturday, April 29th. I'll also include a link in the show notes so you can sign up there. As always, thanks for being here, thanks for listening, and I'm looking forward to talking with you again soon. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.